Growing up, my family had a rule that nobody ever said out loud, keep the peace, no matter what it costs you. We were the kind of household where you learned early to measure your words before you spoke them. Not because anyone was cruel exactly, more like there was a permanent audition happening at all times, and I had never quite figured out the role I was supposed to play. My mother Diane ran the house the way some people run a PR campaign, everything curated, everything softened, every rough edge sanded down before anyone outside could see it. My brother Marcus was her centerpiece. Funny, loud, magnetic in the way people describe someone and mean it as a compliment. He had this gift for walking into a room and making everyone feel like they'd been waiting for him. My stepfather, Dale, thought Marcus hung the moon. Literally once said that at Thanksgiving, lifted his beer and said, "That's my boy. This one's gonna run the world someday." Everyone laughed. I smiled and passed the roles. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who color-coded her tax documents at 23 and actually read the fine print on her lease agreement before she signed it. I'm a forensic accountant, which means I spend my days following money through systems that people designed specifically to hide it. I find things people don't want found. It's painstaking, unglamorous work, and I'm good at it. My firm had given me a commendation the year before for flagging a $2.3 million discrepancy in a construction company's subcontractor billing. Nobody brought that up at Thanksgiving. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. And for a long time, I was the most financially responsible person in my entire family, which is why it took everyone completely by surprise when I nearly lost everything, because of the one person I had never thought to audit. My grandmother on my mother's side, Nana Ruth, passed away 2 springs ago. She was 84, sharp until her final month, and the kind of woman who kept her important documents in a fireproof lockbox labeled, in her own handwriting, "For when I'm gone." I always loved that about her. No drama, just preparation. Nana Ruth left behind a small house in Dayton, Ohio, a savings account, and a certificate of deposit that she'd been quietly building for 22 years. Total value was just under $119,000. She had no surviving spouse, no other children. Her will, drafted by a local estate attorney in 2019, split everything equally between my mother and me. Not Marcus. Not Dale. Me. I found out because the attorney's office called me directly 3 days after the funeral. The woman on the phone was gentle but precise. "Your grandmother listed you as a joint beneficiary," she said. "We'll need to schedule a meeting with both parties to go over the distribution." I thanked her, hung up, and felt something warm settle in my chest. It wasn't about the money exactly. It was about Nana Ruth choosing me, knowing me well enough to include me in something that mattered. I should have known that would be a problem. The first sign came at dinner, maybe 2 weeks after the attorney's call. My mother had invited Marcus and his girlfriend over, the kind of casual dinner that always had an agenda underneath it. We were halfway through the pasta when Marcus set down his fork and said, "So, Claire, you hear anything more from that lawyer?" I looked up. "About the estate? Yeah, we have a meeting next week." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd already calculated. "Mum mentioned you're getting half. That's what the will says." He picked up his fork again. "That's a lot for one person." I didn't answer that. Diane jumped in before the silence got heavy. "We're all just grieving, honey. Ruth loved all of you." She said it to the table, but she was looking at Marcus. I didn't say anything then. I should have. But I grew up learning that saying the obvious thing out loud was considered aggressive in our house, so I let it pass, and I went home that night and told myself I was being paranoid. I wasn't. The attorney's office called me again on the Thursday morning while I was at my desk reviewing a client's general ledger. "Miss Claire," the paralegal said, "I need to let you know, we received a document this week that we have to address before we can proceed." She paused. And in that pause, I felt something cold drop through my chest. "We received an amendment to the will. Is dated 6 weeks before your grandmother passed. It reallocates your share to your brother Marcus." I set my pen down very carefully on the desk. "An amendment." "Yes. We're required to verify its authenticity before distribution can proceed. I want you to know we take document integrity seriously, and we'll be reaching out to the original drafting attorney." I sat there for a moment after I hung up. I've spent my career looking at numbers that don't add up, and when you see one, there's a very particular feeling. Not panic, something colder. A kind of quiet certainty that you are looking at something deliberately constructed. Nana Ruth did not change her will 6 weeks before she died. She had a stroke 5 months before she passed and lost significant fine motor function in her dominant hand. She couldn't write a check without help. She certainly could not have signed a legal amendment. The signature on that document was not hers. I knew it before I even saw it, but when the paralegal emailed me a scanned copy that afternoon, I looked at it for a long time anyway. The loop on the R was wrong. Nana Ruth always made her capital R with a sharp angle at the baseline. This one curved, soft and rounded, like someone who had practiced but hadn't practiced enough. I forwarded it to my work email and opened a new file. Old habit. When something doesn't add up, you don't get emotional. You start documenting. I didn't call my mother that night. I didn't call Marcus. Instead, I called my firm's senior partner, who referred me to an estate litigation attorney named Patricia Wells. I met her the next morning at her office downtown, a calm, precise woman in her 50s who listened to everything I said without interrupting and then asked me 3 questions. Did I have any examples of my grandmother's genuine signature from recent years? Had I been present for any conversations about the will after the stroke? And did I believe my brother had access to my grandmother's personal documents? The answer to all 3 was yes. Nana Ruth had sent me a birthday card 7 months before she died. She'd had to rest her hand between letters. She told me on the phone the stroke had made it harder, but she wanted it to be in her own handwriting. That card was in the drawer of my nightstand. I hadn't been able to throw it away. I told Patricia, and something shifted in her expression. Not excitement, more like recognition. "Keep that card exactly where it is," she said. "Don't move it. Don't scan it. Don't show anyone outside this office." "I know," I said. "Chain of custody." She smiled slightly. "You know the process. I follow money for a living." "Good," she said. "Then you understand that from this point forward, every conversation you have with your family is part of the record." I drove home that afternoon through familiar streets that felt slightly wrong, like furniture shifted 2 inches from where it should be. When I got inside, there was a voicemail from my mother. She sounded gentle, careful. "Honey, I know things are complicated right now, but we're all just trying to figure out what Ruth actually wanted. You know how she was toward the end. She got confused sometimes. Maybe you two can sit down and work something out between you." I listened to it twice. Then I wrote down the timestamp and the exact wording in a notebook I'd started keeping, and I didn't call back. The next few weeks had a strange texture to them. On the surface, everything looked normal. I went to work. I reviewed ledgers. I attended a client presentation and flagged a $14,000 anomaly in their accounts payable that turned out to be a ghost fender. I came home. I documented. Underneath all of it, there was this low, constant hum of something building, the way the air feels before a storm when the pressure hasn't broken yet. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening while I was eating leftover soup at my kitchen counter. He opened with small talk, which was unusual. He asked about work, about my apartment, about whether I'd tried the new restaurant that had opened near my office. I answered briefly and waited. He got there eventually. "Look, Claire," he said, tone shifting, going easier, like he was letting me in on something. "I know this whole estate thing has gotten complicated. I don't want there to be weirdness between us. I'm just saying, Mom's getting older. There are expenses coming. It would make sense to consolidate." "Consolidate," I repeated. "You have a good job. You make good money. You don't need Nana Ruth's house. I've got a lot going on right now, and frankly—" He paused, and in that pause I heard something practiced. "Grandma told me, before everything got bad, that she wanted me to have more of a cushion. She said it herself." "She said that to you?" "Yeah. When?" He hesitated just slightly. "Last year, before the stroke." I set down my spoon. "Marcus," I said, "what you're describing is called an oral amendment. It has no legal standing unless it was witnessed and notarized. You know that, right? Silence on the line. Then I'm not talking about legal standing. I'm talking about what her grandmother actually wanted. Then you can tell that to the court, I said, because that's where this is going. He hung up. Not angry exactly, more like he hadn't expected that sentence, and it didn't fit the script he'd rehearsed. Patricia filed a petition the following week to challenge the authenticity of the amendment. The estate attorney froze distribution pending investigation. A forensic document examiner, not from my firm, Patricia was careful about that, was appointed by the court to analyze the signature. I submitted Nana Ruth's birthday card through proper evidentiary channels. Patricia also subpoenaed the notary who'd supposedly certified the amendment. It turned out the notary's license had lapsed 8 months before the document was dated. My mother left me 3 voicemails over the course of that month. The first 2 were soft, maternal, angled around words like healing and family. The third one had a different texture to it. Claire, what you're doing is going to destroy us. Marcus is your brother. This is not who we are. I listened to that one standing in my kitchen in the early morning, still in the clothes I'd slept in, coffee cooling on the counter. I thought about Nana Ruth at her kitchen table, labouring over each letter of my name on that birthday card, because she wanted it to feel like her. I thought about how she'd press so hard with the pen that you could feel the indentations on the back of the paper. I saved a voicemail and forwarded the audio file to Patricia. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in February. The kind of grey, flat winter day where the sky looks like it can't decide whether to snow. Patricia and I arrived early. The courthouse was one of those municipal buildings designed to make you feel appropriately small. High ceilings, old wood, the faint smell of paper and decades. My mother, Dale, and Marcus were already in the hallway when we arrived. My mother looked like she hadn't slept. Dale had his hand at her back. Marcus was standing slightly apart from them, jaw set, wearing a blazer I didn't recognize, newer than his usual style. His attorney, someone Dale had found, the kind who advertised on local radio, was whispering something near his ear. Marcus looked at me when I walked in. I looked back. Neither of us said anything. Inside the courtroom, his attorney went first, and he built his case around the word intent. He said my grandmother had expressed her wishes verbally on multiple occasions. He said the amendment, while perhaps procedurally imperfect, reflected a genuine desire to provide for Marcus. He used the phrase the family's collective memory 3 times, as though memory itself was a legal document. My mother, in the gallery, nodded along. Patricia didn't raise her voice once. She presented the forensic document examiner's report first. The signature on the amendment showed a pen pressure, letter spacing, and baseline trajectory inconsistent with samples of my grandmother's known handwriting, including 3 signed documents from the same year and the birthday card submitted into evidence. The examiner had concluded with a high degree of professional certainty that the signature was not authentic. Then, the notary situation. The license had lapsed. The notarization was invalid on its face. Then the medical records, subpoenaed from Nana Ruth's neurologist, outlining the extent of her fine motor impairment following the stroke, and the assessment that complex handwriting tasks were significantly compromised. And finally, the original will, executed in 2019, signed by my grandmother with witnesses, leaving her estate equally to her daughter and to me. No amendment, no confusion. Just a woman who had known exactly what she wanted and had written it down clearly while she still could. The room was quiet in a way that had weight to it. Not dramatic, not like the movies. Just the particular silence of a space where the facts have stopped being arguable. Marcus's attorney tried once more. He said something about the court considering the spirit of the decedent's wishes. The judge looked at him over his reading glasses with an expression that I can only describe as professionally unimpressed. "Counselor," the judge said, "the court does not adjudicate spirits. We adjudicate evidence." My mother made a sound in the gallery, a short exhale, almost inaudible. Dale put his hand on her arm. The ruling took about 12 minutes. The amendment was declared invalid. The original will stood. Distribution would proceed as written. Marcus did not look at me when the gavel came down. He stared straight ahead at the table in front of him. and his jaw was tight, and the blazer suddenly looked like a costume. His attorney was already gathering papers. Dale was already steering my mother toward the door. In the hallway, my mother stopped. She turned around and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before on her face. Something past frustration, past guilt, something that looked almost like grief. "I hope you're happy," she said. I thought about that for a second, not to be cruel in my response, but because it was an actual question worth considering. "No," I said, "but I'm done." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not going to keep paying the price for the way this family works." I kept my voice level. "Nana Ruth left that to me because she wanted to, and someone forged her signature to take it. I'm not going to pretend that's a misunderstanding." My mother's face crumpled for a moment before she composed it. "We don't know that Marcus, Patricia," I said, not loudly. My attorney stepped forward. "Miss Diane," Patricia said, "I'd recommend not continuing this conversation. There may be further proceedings." My mother looked between us, and something in her finally went quiet. Dale guided her toward the exit. Marcus had already left. I stood in that hallway for a moment after they were gone, not triumphant, not relieved in the way I'd imagined, just very still, like the world had settled onto a new foundation. Outside, the winter air was sharp and smelled like cold pavement. Patricia walked beside me toward the parking garage. "The DA's office will review the document examiner's findings," she said. "Given the notary issue and the handwriting analysis, they may pursue charges." "I know," I said. "You'll be contacted as a complaining witness." "I know." She glanced at me. "You doing okay?" I thought about Nana Ruth's kitchen, which smelled like dish soap and the lavender lotion she kept by the sink. I thought about sitting at her table as a kid while she showed me how to balance her checkbook, how she'd said, "Numbers tell the truth even when people don't." I thought about the birthday card in the evidence file now, the careful, struggling letters of my name. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." 3 months later, Marcus was charged with forgery of a legal document and fraud in connection with an estate proceeding. 2 felonies. He pled not guilty, and the case went to a preliminary hearing where the forensic evidence was presented again, and this time there was no ambient noise of family feeling to soften it. Just the facts, clean and sequential, in a room where the only currency was what could be proven. He was convicted on both counts. The sentencing came on a Thursday, grey again, a different Thursday than the one I was expecting. 18 months probation, a $12,000 fine, and mandatory restitution. His attorney had argued successfully against incarceration given no prior record, but the judge had been clear about the severity of what had been done. "Forging the signature of an elderly woman recovering from a stroke," she said, "in order to redact her estate, is not a mistake. It is a choice." She looked at Marcus when she said it, and I watched him receive those words, and I didn't feel anything I expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not closure in any clean sense, more like confirmation. The truth had been established officially now, filed into the record, permanent. Nobody in my family could look me in the eye and call it a misunderstanding. My mother sent me an email the week after sentencing. Long, careful, emotionally complex in the way that people are when they're trying to apologize without fully owning the thing they need to apologize for. She talked about the stress of grief, about how she had tried to stay neutral, about how she loved both of us. The last line said, "I just want my family back." I read it in the parking garage of my office building on my lunch break, eating a sandwich in my car. When I finished the email, I finished the sandwich. Then I opened my drafts folder, where I'd started and abandoned 3 responses over the past year. I deleted all of them. Then I closed the email app and went back inside to work. I wasn't punishing her. I just didn't have anything to say yet that was true and kind at the same time. And I'd spent enough years saying things just to keep the peace. The estate settled fully in April. My half of the CD, the savings account, and the proceeds from the sale of the Dayton house came to just over $89,000. I put $40,000 in a high-yield account. I used $15,000 to pay off the last of my graduate school loans, something I'd been chipping at for 6 years. I held on to the rest, no particular plan, just options kept open the way Nana Ruth always believed in keeping options open. I did one more thing. I found a framing shop near my apartment and had Nana Ruth's birthday card professionally preserved, acid-free matte, UV glass, the kind of frame meant to last. I hung it in my home office, next to my desk, where I see it every morning when I open my laptop. The letters of my name are uneven and slow and completely hers. My firm gave me a promotion that same month, senior forensic analyst, a small team of my own to manage. On my first day in the new role, I sat in my office for a minute before anyone else arrived, looking at the updated nameplate on the door and thinking about nothing in particular. Just the quiet of early morning and the hum of the building coming to life around me. I heard from Marcus once, indirectly. A mutual cousin mentioned he'd moved to another state, we starting somewhere with less history. I didn't ask for details. I hoped, genuinely, that he'd figure out something better for himself, not for my sake, just because wasting a life on the wrong thing seemed like a poor return. My mother and I speak occasionally now, short calls, careful ones. She asks about work and I answer. She doesn't mention Marcus. I don't mention the email I never responded to. We're building something smaller than what we had, but more honest, and I'm not sure yet whether it will hold. Some structures take time to know if they're sound. What I do know is this. I come from a family that believed keeping the peace was the same thing as having it. They weren't malicious, most of them. They just confused silence with safety, and when something disturbed the picture, their first instinct was to restore it by any means necessary, including ones that left marks. I learned something different from Nana Ruth's kitchen table. Numbers tell the truth, even when people don't. And the truth, once it's in the record, doesn't need anyone to defend it. It just stands there, steady and unglamorous, doing exactly what it was always doing. I don't need them to understand that. I don't need them to apologize in the right words or admit to the exact shape of what they did. I needed the court to establish what happened, and it did. Everything else is just noise I've stopped trying to decode. Some mornings I walk past the framing on my wall without even seeing it consciously, the way you stop noticing the things that have settled into belonging. Other mornings I stop and look at those careful, imperfect letters and feel the specific weight of being known by someone who took the trouble to make it personal. That's the thing about the people who actually see you. They leave evidence. I keep that. The rest I let go. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this ended. Not in an abstract way, in a very specific, almost clinical way, the same way I think about financial discrepancies at work. Every outcome has a chain. Every result was built by someone's choices, stacked one on top of another until the weight of them became impossible to ignore. Marcus didn't wake up one morning and decide to be someone who would forge a dying woman's signature. That's not how it works. He'd been practicing for years, in smaller ways, letting praise go unearned, letting consequences land on someone else, letting my mother smooth over every rough edge until he genuinely stopped believing rough edges applied to him. That's what unchecked behavior actually does to a person. It doesn't just go away. It grows into something more dangerous, because the person at the center of it never develops the muscle you need to stop yourself. And my mother, I don't say this with bitterness, I've sat with it long enough to say it plainly, she thought she was protecting her family. She thought keeping the peace was an act of love. But what she actually did all those years was protect Marcus from the feedback that might have changed him. Every time she smoothed something over, she sent him one more message that the rules didn't fully apply. That's not love. That's a slow harm disguised as one. What I learned from Nana Ruth, and I think she knew she was teaching me, even when she was just showing me how to balance a checkbook at her kitchen table, is that integrity is not dramatic. It's not a speech or a moment. It's a habit you build so quietly that by the time someone tries to shake it, it doesn't move. Nana Ruth kept her documents in a fireproof box. She had her will drafted by an attorney. She put my name on it clearly with witnesses because she understood that love without documentation is just a feeling, and feelings can be rewritten by whoever is standing in the room when you're no longer there to correct them. I think about that when I look at the framed card on my office wall. She struggled through every letter. She could have had someone else write it. She didn't, because she wanted it to be undeniably hers. That instinct, to make the truth legible, to leave a record, is something I carry with me every day in my work, and now, in my life. The resilience I had to find through this wasn't the loud kind. It wasn't fighting or anger or any of the things people expect. It was the quieter, harder kind, sitting with the fact that the people who should have had my back chose differently, and deciding that their choice didn't get to define mine. Deciding to follow the process even when every instinct said it would be easier to let it go. Deciding over and over that the truth was worth the discomfort of establishing it. Marcus will carry what he did. I don't need to carry it for him. My mother is figuring out, slowly, what it costs to confuse loyalty with honesty. That's their work, not mine. What's mine is this: the record, the evidence, the outcome, and a grandmother who knew me well enough to put my name in a document, in her own hand, so that even after she was gone, she was still telling the truth about who I was to her. That's the thing about doing things right. It compounds over time, quietly, in ways you don't always see until you need it.